The great hall fell silent, dozens of green-skinned centaurioid ladies lowering their heads in acknowledgement as the Queen's champion mounted the steps before the throne. She stopped a single step below the top as the Queen stepped down to meet her. "So it is done, Highness," the champion intoned, kneeling on her forelegs. The Queen smiled and placed her left hand atop her champion's head, her right arm still in a sling. She pushed back the feathery branching tresses from the younger woman's face. "So it is," the Queen sighed, her eyes flicking to the corpse of her final rival lying on the flagstones, head twisted on a broken neck. "But a new task begins. We shall build something greater, you and I. Arise and join your Queen. Yulashana Relashana." There was an audible gasp from the assembled Felra at these words, and then theme music and the ending credits. The apartment lights came back up as the 3V set shut off, taking the ancient Felra throne room with it. 3 young women were thus revealed to be scattered around the den. Vikaxerathexes, a 4-armed, reptiloid Jixavan, was on one end of the couch, looking thoughtful. Her human sister Arizona was sprawled across the remainder of the sofa, one hand dangling off into a bowl of mayonnaise-covered artificial fish nuggets. Their roommate, Shirala Rishinalan, a fine and healthy specimen of a Felra, was sitting on a straddle chair next to them with a wineglass in one hand and a nearly empty bottle in the other. "So," said Arizona after a moment. "That was the greatest work of Felra cinema, huh?" "Indeed," Shirala answered. Her galactophonic normally had a drawling, slightly rustic sound to it. The more wine she drank, the thicker that accent tended to get. It was only medium thick at this point, but another bottle or so and, even if she were still talking sensibly, it would be nearly incomprehensible. The rise of Yilladara the Conqueror is the pinnacle of Felra movie-making. It simply does not get better than this. She smiled and raised her glass in salute to the 3V set, then drank it empty. "Really? Wow." Arizona's eyes widened. "For the first time ever, I genuinely pity you guys." Vika swatted her on the leg. "Ari. Don't be culturally insensitive." Shirala turned to regard the human with a stare that was only a little bit off-kilter, impressive considering the 2 empty bottles beside her, and made a go-ahead motion with her glass. "Are you deprecating the greatest movie ever produced, Arizona? The movie which has become a touchstone of Felra culture and the standard by which all other cinema is judged? Is that your intent?" Arizona shrugged. "I'm not saying it was entirely terrible. I mean, we got to watch smoking hot 4-boobed centaur chicks flounce around for, 5 hours? So it had that going for it. And it was cool when Yilladara's buddy finally wrung the neck of that wannabe princess bitch who'd been causing so much drama. Other than that, though, boring. Like, government office waiting room boring. Lecture on proper flossing techniques boring." She grinned and nudged her sister with her foot. "Vika's sex life boring." "Hey." Vika swatted her again. "My apologies, Arizona," Shirala said, rather icily, "for exposing you to a film which contains neither non-stop explosions nor flatulence jokes." "No worries." Arizona either missed the sarcasm or chose to ignore it. She perked up a little. "Do Felra make fart jokes? Do you guys even fart at all?" Knowing you, if you did it would sound like a clarinet and smell like orchids. But, hey, I like stuff that's not explodey or jokey, too. Like cowboy movies. Those are awesome." "The Rise of Yilladara the Conqueror is an artistic masterpiece," Shirala tried again. "It is meant to both reflect the historical events and arouse contemplation of their context." "Well, it didn't arouse anything else, which is kind of remarkable with all the hotties in it. I thought you said this film was all transgressive and taboo-breaking and stuff." "Very much so. It caused quite the controversy when it first came out. Viewers were shocked." "I'll bet they were," Arizona chuckled. "Electric jolts would be the best way to keep the audience awake." Vika jumped into the conversation before her sister could get Shirala's fuse lit. I thought it was quite a spectacle, she offered. Very lavish sets and costumes. And I've heard that it's very historically accurate. Shirala smiled and preened just a little. I didn't say it wasn't pretty to look at, Arizona said with a negligent wave. And historical accuracy isn't all that. I mean, real-life cowboys very seldom shot each other, but there's a reason they make Western movies about gunfights and not about staring at cows and shoveling shit all day. People want action. There were 2 big battle scenes, Shirala protested. So there were 2 4 or 5-minute scenes of soldiers getting ambushed and then giving up in a nearly 5-hour movie. And there must have been a half-hour of marching back and forth and symbols on a map scenes before each one of those. Felra warfare has always been centered on maneuver and ambush, especially in the ancient era. Shirala poured herself another glassful and chugged most of it. It's about subtlety and cunning, rather than brute force. And subtlety is probably really useful in real life, retorted Arizona, who had approximately the same relationship with subtlety that a cat does with altruism. In a movie, it's a snooze fest. Like that scene at the big party where Yilladara and what's-her-name, Princess Bitchtits. Vlenthelin, Shirala corrected. Spend 20 minutes changing outfits and adjusting that ferny stuff you guys have instead of hair. She waved a hand in the general direction of Shirala's feathery tresses. It's called tvan. At each other. That was subtle. So subtle, only the 7 energy drinks I had for supper were keeping me awake. Which is more than I could say for Vika. Vika jerked slightly. I didn't doze off. I was contemplating the subtext of that scene. You drooled on your shoulder, sis. It was deep contemplation. Super deep. Shirala, meanwhile, had set her glass aside and took her next slug of wine straight from the bottle. That scene was all about the tension, Arizona. The steadily mounting tension as Yilladara and Vlenthelin competed for dominance. She drew herself up proudly, wobbling just a little. Felra leaders have always been chosen based on cunning, grace, and beauty. Yilladara and Vlenthelin were seen by the other nobles as equals in intellect and grace, so they were each trying to establish themselves as the loveliest. Which Yilladara eventually did by putting the flower Lishana gave her behind her ear. Vlenthelin had no answer for that, so Yilladara triumphed. And it symbolized that she couldn't have gotten where she was without Lishana. And that's another thing that bugged me, Arizona groused. Lishawatsit actually seemed kind of cool, so I don't get why everybody was such a bitch to her all through the movie. They acted like she had mega cooties, or something. Shirala pointed dramatically with the wine bottle. Not normally given to such gestures, booze had a way of bringing out her inner thespian. Aha! That's part of what made this film so transgressive back in the day. Lishana was a... She paused, thinking. Galactophonic doesn't have a word for it, but her mother was a... There's no word for that, either. She considered, toying absently with her locks of tvan. To put it bluntly, she was a product of unilateral impregnation. Her mother was a self-fertilizer. That's why she had to use her mother's name, and why it was so dramatic when Queen Yilladara gave her a new one. It meant she was a real person and not just a copy of her mother. She noticed that the others were staring at her, Vika's mouth slightly open and Arizona's eyes worryingly alight. What? Vika was the first to respond, if a bit hesitantly. So, you guys, that is, Felra can self-fertilize? We can, Shirala said with a slight glare. But it's not something that's done and most Felra cultures have outlawed or at least discouraged it. If for no other reason than that impregnating yourself with your own seed is the very pinnacle of narcissism. Vika was trying not to stare and failing. But... I mean, biologically you. Shirala's cheeks went a brighter green, though that could have been the wine, and she seemed to find something terribly interesting about the far wall. Felra are dormant hermaphrodites. We go through a brief, active male phase every few years for mating purposes. It is not something we like to discuss with others. She noticed Arizona's eyes brightening even further, and the smile on the girl's face would not have been out of place in a high-security asylum. Shirala sighed. I assume you have questions. An absolute metric fuckton, Arizona chirped. But I'm gonna save them for when you're sober enough to be properly embarrassed by them. Right now, we've got your favorite movie to pick apart. Pick away, Shirala said grandly. It is an absolute masterpiece, a summit of the filmmaking art which can in no way be improved upon, and I shan't be convinced otherwise. Yeah. I can improve it with just 3 words. Leather. Halter. Tops. For one of the very few times in her life, Shirala was caught completely off guard. What? You heard me, Arizona said, with the sort of smug smile that, on a diplomat's face, might start a war. This movie takes place in ancient barbarian times, right? Barbarians in a movie means leather. Ooh, and fur. Fur-trimmed leather halter tops. I doubt that's historical, Ari, Vika said, not quite comfortable with the look in Shirala's eyes. Arizona shrugged. Who cares? I'm talking about making it a better movie, not better history. Yilladara and Lise Hannah, said Shirala, voice tight. 2 of the most iconic characters in Felra cinema. Dressed in leather halter tops. Yeah, that would be pretty sweet. Arizona popped a nugget into her mouth. Oh, and that chase scene near the beginning, where the guards are after them. That should have been done in vehicles instead of on foot. Everybody loves a car chase. You would put cars in the Rise of Yilladara the Conqueror. Shirala's tone of voice was about the same as if she were asking about putting turds on a birthday cake. Well, no. Not cars, duh. But they had those big freight wagon things. Have the heroines commandeer one of those and the guards grab another one and off they go. Shirala took another drink to fortify herself. It seemed to get most of her control back. Why would they take a freight wagon? And if they did, why would the guards chase them in one? A Felra on foot is twice as fast. Because pedestrian crashes look stupid, but vehicle crashes look awesome. And every good vehicle chase should end with a big, spectacular crash. So, the whole point of putting the characters in vehicles would be, to crash them? Duh. It's a movie, Arizona replied as if her point was self-evident. Shirala shook her head and drained the last swallow or 2 from her bottle. So, you would improve The Rise of Yilladara the Conqueror by making it into an entirely different film, is that it? No, no. The basic story is fine. Arizona waved her hand as though granting a concession. I just tighten it up. Cut the run time in half and speed everything up. Like trim all those scenes of Yilladara and Lishahazit staring at each other and looking like they're trying to keep down a bad meal. Shirala made a frustrated little noise in the back of her throat. Those looks were because Yilladara was going through a male phase and they weren't. Whatever she was about to say, she cut it off and chewed it back. Never mind about that. What else? Let's see. Arizona mused. Skimpy leather, vehicle chase with a big crash, trim the boring stuff. I guess next would be to make the battle scenes bigger and longer. Oh. And add catapults. Sword fight movies are always more epic with catapults. I mean, who doesn't love watching big flying rock smashing stuff? So, you would destroy all the romantic tension for the sake of big flying rocks, would you? Nah, I'd deal with the romance stuff, too. Just, instead of Yilladara and her buddy exchanging all these aching glances and stuff there toward the end, I'd have old Yili walk right up to her champion after she strangles Princess Bitch-Tits and tell everybody, I'm queen now, so what I say goes. And the queen says, gimme some sugar, baby. Then she smooches the breath right out of Lishawatsit right there over Bitch-Tits' dead body and declares to everybody, this is my sweetie, you hoe bags. Anybody who don't like it can kiss my leather-trimmed royal ass. Roll credits. Arizona started to pop a humfish nugget into her mouth, but thought better of it. I need something to wash down my nuggies. Anybody else want anything from the kitchen? No one did. Once she was gone, Vika turned to Shirala, noting the hard set to the Felra's lips and the brusqueness with which she uncorked her next bottle. Always the peacemaker, she said quietly, I'm sure Ari didn't mean to be offensive about your culture, Shirala. There was no offense, Shirala said with an airy wave of her hand. Your sister is who she is and does what she does. I mean, yes, she just described hacking up one of the greatest artistic achievements of Felra filmmaking with a human-shaped meat cleaver, but that does not bother me. No, as much as I love the rise of Yilladara the Conqueror, I am upset mostly with myself. Yourself? What for? The rather mortifying realization that. Shirala sighed deeply and took a big swig from the bottle before leaning forward and looking Vika right in the eyes. In a soft, conspiratorial tone, she continued, Arizona's version of the film? I would totally watch that shit. All right, cheered Vika Xerathexes as she made her way into the den. Who's ready for movie night? Her face scales were blazing yellow with joy, she had on her favorite comfy pajamas and fuzzy tail stocking, and all four hands were full of the night's necessities, a bucket of salty toasted kelp pods to snack on, a massive everyberry smoothie for herself, a vodka and gamer fuel cocktail for her sister, and an old-fashioned 3V movie M&M stick in a faded case. I'm ready, declared her human sister, Arizona, from the couch and she was curled on. She sent a pointed look at the den's third occupant. I just hope it's another slow-moving 6-hour epic about ancient aristocrat bitches giving each other meaningful glances and changing clothes. This was said with approximately 1,100% of the recommended daily allowance of sarcasm. Oh no, drawled the intended target of said sarcasm, Shirala, a centaurioid Felra of remarkable beauty and even more remarkable capacity for chemical intoxicants. I'm certain we are all just thirsting to watch naked car chases and explosions, Part 17. Her own sarcasm was distinguished from Arizona's only by sounding comparatively classier. Everybody knows those movies peaked at Part 9, said Arizona dismissively as she took her drink from Vika. Vika huffed at them both and stamped her foot, tail twitching. Honestly, this is why we can't have nice evenings. Must the two of you argue every time we watch something together? Ari and Shirala looked at each other, a little confused, before Shirala answered her. Yes, Vika. Arizona and I do have to argue every time we watch a film. Yeah, sis. I mean, chewing up Ms. Four-Legged Art Snob's pretentious-ass taste in movies is a big part of the fun. Indeed. The opportunity to thoroughly dissect and critique Arizona's Philistine notions as to what constitutes entertainment in an attempt to enlighten or at least chastise her is one of movie night's attractions. Vika just looked back and forth between them. So, you argue with each other because you both enjoy it? We said as much, did we not? Shirala uncorked her first-ish bottle of the evening and began pouring. Vika kept looking back and forth, considering. So, is this some kind of belligerent sexual tension thing, or what? The next 15 minutes were entirely taken up by the absolute shitstorm that question triggered. Once order had been restored to the household, Vika's confusion had been cleared up, Shirala had rescinded any blood vows of retaliation she might have recklessly sworn, and Ari had put her clothes back on, movie night was able to continue. Anyway, said Vika, since you two can never agree on what movie to watch for reasons which may or may not have anything to do with inadequately suppressed attraction, I picked this time. Her face scales had gone a giddy sunflower yellow, in contrast to her still sulky compatriots. She was practically bouncing as she held up the movie case for the other two to see. Arizona perked up. Hey, is that? Yes. The original? Oh yes. That's why I had to get it on MEM stick, because the downloadable versions have all been revised. This one still has the Ribathy as the bad guys. Ah, that's so cool. Shirala seemed confused by all this. Might I assume from your demeanor that this particular film holds meaning for the both of you? That it does, Vika replied, beaming. Castaway Classroom was the movie that made me decide to become a doctor. It made me want to build catapults and throw big flaming rocks at Ribathy slave raiders, added Arizona. One of us outgrew their youthful desires, and one didn't. I mean, I'd still do it, you know. The chunk fum squish Ribathy thing, if the opportunity presented itself. Just not as a full career. Vika went on. It's an old movie, made about 150 years ago, when humans were first emigrating to the United Republic in large numbers. It was one of the first Jixavan movies to have Jishis and humans as equal heroes and show how much we could do together. It also had the first human Jishia romantic. Arizona was cut off by a foot poke from her sister. No spoilers. Vika hissed. She popped the MEM stick into the 3V set and movie night properly began. 2 hours later, the kelp pods were nearly gone, the everyberry smoothie was ancient history, Arizona was on her second disgusting alcohol caffeine taurine mixture, Shirala had murdered a bottle and a half of smokeberry wine, and the credits were rolling on Castaway Classroom. Vika blinked rapidly as the apartment lights came up. She laughed, just a little. It's funny, but watching that as a child, it always seemed to last so much longer. I can see why, said Shirala, not sounding snide at all, to Arizona's evident surprise. While the premise of students struggling to survive on an uncharted planet after escaping a raider attack is a simple one, the character interactions are really quite engrossing. Yeah, Arizona interjected. I always liked the interaction between the Ribathy raiders and that catapult Akvan and Normandy built. Chunk. Fum. Squish. Shirala sent her an annoyed look. I believe that was a trebuchet, not a catapult. It utilized a counterweight rather than torsion for its propulsive power. Arizona shrugged. Same thing. A trebuchet is just a kind of catapult. No, it isn't. Ari shrugged again. You say, tomato, I say, who gives a shit. Vika's face scales had gone a wistful pale green. No matter how many times I see this, I'm still on the edge of my seat when Thivija has to operate on Zaban and Virginia to remove the lasher worms. The first time I saw that was the exact moment I decided that doctors were the most awesome people ever. I remember. Arizona gave a snort. For weeks after that, every time we played, you had to be Thivija and I was Virginia. You'd pretend you were cutting ramen noodles out of me and they were trying to burrow into your face. Well, Virginia was pretty cool, too, Vika argued. She was the group's best scout, just like Thivija was the best medic. Yeah, but I'd rather be a Connie. She's a total badass. Shirala gave her a curious look. Would you not have needed 2 more arms and a tail to be a Connie? We were playing pretend, Arizona answered, with an unvoiced but heavily implied, duh. I could have just pretended to be a Jishia. Ah. That is a valid point. Vika gave her sister a nudge. I seem to recall that you always preferred to be Kamchatka. Yeah, Cammy's a pretty tough chick, too. Not quite the badass Akani is, but she's the one who set the rock trap that took out the Ribathy commander. That was Kamchatka? Shirala asked. The human girl with the braid? That's her. The one who became romantically involved with the Jixavan engineering student. Yeah. She got all smoochy with Akvan. Which just adds to her awesome points, because Akvan is hot. Total Jishia beefcake. Hell, the actor who played him is still alive, and still a sizzling hunk of manhood. Dull-scaled great-grandpa or not, I'd still fuck his brains out. In cold mud, even. That was the first on-screen Jishia human couple in United Republic 3V, Vika explained. Akvan and Kamchatka were supposed to be symbolic and what have you. And you like to pretend to be Kamchatka? Shirala was giving Arizona a rather odd, penetrating look. I suppose that figures. What are you getting at? Arizona demanded, suspicious. The Felra shrugged elaborately and took another mouthful of wine before answering. It just seems odd in one respect, yet fitting in another, that you would identify with the character of Kamchatka. Equally so that you would express a desire for the character of Akvan and his actor. It is certainly revealing, at any rate. What are you implying? And why do I feel like I'll be pissed off when you tell me? It's just that Akvan bears a strong resemblance to your father, Professor Xerathex's. Shirala's face bore all the expression of a beautiful green paving stone. What? Yelped Ari. What? Vika yelped even louder. Now Shirala's face did take on an expression, smugness. Vast, smirky smugness. Only the fact that she was a Felra and therefore relentlessly desirable kept the expression from being the kind of look that would warrant an immediate ass-kicking. The individual you are expressing desire to engage in carnality with strongly resembles your stepfather, Arizona. It is a simple fact. What? It is not. Akvan doesn't look like Dad. For reply, Shirala wordlessly held up the MEM sticks case and indicated the appropriate character pictured on the cover. A moment later, she called up a hollow on her wrist top. It was a picture both Xerathex's sisters had seen many times before, from the back cover of one of their father's early books on spontaneous social reordering in emergency conditions. Note, the same broad muzzle and strong jawline. Very similar eye color and nostril shapes. They both have thick necks with darker scales on the front. Arizona was doing a passable impression of a landed fish, eyes bulging, mouth pointlessly working. Vika gave her sister a sidelong look. Ari. You. Just, you. That jarred Arizona's voice back into functionality. What? No. I do not have daddy issues. I don't. Your taste could hardly be faulted, Shirala replied, all sweetness and empathy. Professor Xerathex's is, much like the actor playing Akvan, total Jishia beefcake, as you put it. Vika held up a hand, looking a little queasy. Please stop talking about my dad that way. Even if it's sort of a compliment, it kind of makes my heart puke. Daddy issues, Arizona was repeating. Don't have, Never have. Akvan is just hot. Lots of girls think so. Perfectly natural. Nothing to do with Dad. Nope. Shirala just smiled indulgently at her. And that is not even getting into the subtext between Kamchatka and Thivija. Vika's head snapped around. Wait, what? The subtext. The unspoken chemistry between the two characters. All those subtle hints of deeper feeling between them, of unvoiced emotion. They were good friends, said Vika uneasily. Kami and Thivija worked after school at the veterinarian's office together. Of course there was emotion there. Well, yes. Shirala drained her glass, hiding a smile. But there was also the unexpressed longing for something beyond that. Vika gave her a flat look. I've seen this movie like 20 times and I don't remember any of that. Because you were not looking for it, darling. You are a delightfully forthright person, and since you express yourself so earnestly, you would of course expect that others do, as well. But as a Felra and a less than forthright person myself, I seek out the unspoken, revealing details. I meant what I said about the character interactions in this film being engrossing. The relationships among our 12 young protagonists were nothing less than a straining webwork of unarticulated emotion, simmering resentments, and, unvoiced passion. Vika kept staring at her. I think you may be reading too much into things. That is possible. Shirala used the act of filling her glass to give the impression that she was considering Vika's words. I suppose I could be misattributing motives to the way Thivich's gaze would linger on Kamchatka in their scenes together, of how she would take the opportunity to touch her during conversations, even when there was no real need to do so. That's just them being friends. Vika retorted, vaguely unsettled. Shirala laughed. You and I are friends. Do you lay a hand on me when we speak? Do you stare after me when I leave the room? Vika began sputtering like a bottom-market rental car. Of course, I don't doubt that you identify with Thivicha. She's a clever and adorable young woman who takes care of others. You likely never consciously noticed her unexpressed longing to be with Kamchatka, who just happens to be the character Arizona most identifies with. What are you? Vika looked stiffly back and forth between Shirala and Ari. Are you implying? Arizona made a scrunch-nosed face at her. Sis. You. Hey. I do not have any unexpressed longings, Ari. Oh, but you think I have daddy issues. As the argument began spooling up, Shirala just smiled slightly and cracked open another bottle of wine. She had actually enjoyed Castaway Classroom, a rather cute adventure tale. Vika had acceptable enough taste in entertainment. The main problem Shirala had with Human and Jixavan films was that they were far too short, typically a mere 2 or so hours as compared to the 5 to 7 hours of Felra movies. However, by using her head, a quick-witted Felra with an eye for subtext and a talent for off-the-cuff psychobabbly bullshitting could easily get herself a few more hours of entertaining drama out of one. Besides, she hadn't really taken back that oath of retaliation for Vika daring to imply that she, Shirala Rishinalan, would possibly have some kind of subconscious desire for, Arizona Xerathexes. You. Just you.